Excited once again to have the man with over 30 years of elite and professional racing, over 20 years of running and triathlon coaching, and shoe dog extraordinaire from the running company Yarraville and coach of Run to PB, Sammy Mclean. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, g'day, Matty. How are you, Zaka? It's a nice intro.
Hey, Sammy. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Going okay here.
Looks like, unlike myself and Mattress, you're handling lockdown pretty well, judging by your hair. Because I can see from Matty and I, how's it gone a bit wild?
Yeah, it was nothing much changes up top here. So, yeah, I don't really go too much of a beard either, so it's this is pretty much the look.
Yours is getting pretty wild, Zaka.
It is. Yeah, I really need those barbs open up. It's gone beyond my own skills to sort that out. And Sham's not putting her hand up to do it. So, yeah.
plenty of good lockdown beards out there.
There is. Yeah. And you're getting out for some runs, Sammy? Yeah,
nothing too much has changed since I think we last spoke. Just, yeah, fair bit of running, fair bit of riding. Integrating the two. Taken the foot off the pedal a little bit in terms of probably the marathon approach, but as we're just chatting off air, probably make a call at the end of this week whether to press on with the Melbourne training or maybe look to something kind of in the new year like Canberra or something. Yeah,
nice one. Stoked to have you back on again, and we've got a few questions to get through. Listening question later on, but I guess we were sort of talking about the way we're running at the moment, and even in lockdown, is it that some of the way we're running, throwing in a few extra pick up runs, things like that. So, in terms of having a shoe that you can, as a bit of an all rounder, is there a shoe that's quite versatile, and what does make a shoe versatile?
Yeah, easy. Good question. I like this because I kind of love my versatile shoes personally. I suppose when we're talking about a versatile shoe, it's not technically a category of shoe. It's more a way of describing how a shoe kind of behaves or might function for a runner. So how it's how it might be handling different paces or different surfaces and so forth in terms of that's how a shoe is versatile. Like brands will often have quite a defined way of going, this is a support shoe, this is a neutral shoe, this is a racing shoe. Whereas they don't really set out to go, this is a versatile shoe, so to speak. I've kind of often wondered if shoes that become really versatile are actually shoes that maybe in production they didn't get quite right, if that makes sense. Like maybe they set out to have it in a particular way and then just for whatever reason they didn't quite nail the design and it just ended up being a versatile shoe. So I've actually got a couple of examples here if you want me to show you a little more what I'm. So this is a new shoe from Mizuno here, the Rebellion. So I've actually been doing a little bit in this. So I don't really not so much understand, but I kind of wonder what Mizuno had in mind when they were designing this, because it's got a lot of attributes of like a super shoe. Like its price point is $300. It's got Pebax foam. It's got a carbon plate. So, that's three things that normally you'd associate with a super shoe. But then you kind of delve a little bit deeper into the shoe and the weight of it's like 250 grams. It's got a lot of outer sole rubber here, so it's quite durable. So you don't really associate those two things with a super shoe. So in the end, what you get is I'm guessing like a pretty kind of versatile shoe. So, it could probably be a daily trainer for someone. It could probably be a race shoe for someone. It could probably be a session shoe for someone. So that's probably a pretty good example that I can go through of quite a versatile shoe. Another one I've got here that I've really enjoyed in the past is the Saucony Speed. So, again, I don't think it's not quite a super shoe. It's probably not quite a mileage shoe, but it just seems to complement like a lot of different training paces and distances. Yeah. So, yeah, as I said, I personally really enjoy shoes that are quite versatile. But it's not really technically a category of shoe. It's just more how the runner tends to, use it within their training, if that makes sense.
And what sort of aspects would you look for in a shoe you classify as versatile? Like you look for it to be cushioned, you look for it, responsive so you can get some faster sessions happening. Like what sort of aspects would you, what would you see?
Yeah, I mean, it's normally all of those things. Like it tends to be quite broad in the way that it can be used versus being too specific. Yeah, so weight wise, they'll always be around a particular weight. I think they will generally have a certain level of being responsive. Give you something back off the ground, but then they can also probably be used over some longer, faster runs as well. So I mean, Matty, you've had the Peg Turbo in the past in your rotation, haven't you?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've used that. Well, what was it? A couple of years ago, really was the last time it came out. And I was actually devastated when they stopped producing it. And I was actually thinking like why it was that Nike, didn't go ahead and keep pushing that Peg Turbo. I wasn't sure if it was because it became a versatile shoe and they wanted people to more, buy specific shoes. So they would buy, you'd buy your daily trainer, you'd buy your racing shoe, you'd buy your tempo shoe, rather than having a shoe that's going to cover across them all. So they're going to sell, more shoes around that. I don't know if that's something that you might think.
No, I mean, I think that kind of highlights what we're just chatting about, in that I wonder what Nike's idea was when they first designed that shoe. And then it was probably more a result of runners like yourself going, oh, well, gee, I can actually use this on my sessions. I can use this on my daily run. So it's more that it's almost like the runner almost manipulates a little bit, what the aim of the shoe was versus how it ends up being used by, like a broad spectrum of runners.
Yeah, because I was thinking I'd put it down as a bit of the Max Gawn of the football world. Like you can chuck him down forward and he'll kick 5 goals. You put him on the ruck and he'll tap it down, but then he'll do some tackles. Like it had a bit of everything. And I know I used it for I remember the first time I used it was in a fartlek and 2 minutes on, 1 minute float fartlek for 30 minutes. And I got to the end of that and it had hit the session really well. And it probably wasn't. It's not all just about the shoes, but the shoes felt really good doing that sort of I guess sort of 5K-ish sort of pace that I was trying to target. And I came away from that thinking I'd almost be tempted to race in this shoe. Like it felt that good. But then I chucked it on for a long run and I thought, came back and I really liked the cushioning that was in the shoe. And I came back feeling like, this is a great long run shoe. Like I could almost wear these every day. And so that's why I was pretty devastated when they got rid of it. And I even chucked it on for some 400-meter reps on the track and came out of that thinking, geez, I could get moving in these shoes as well. They're really responsive with that Foam X. So it was a shoe that, I really noticed that had that versatility.
Yeah. And I think because you've had good experiences in it in different types of sessions, then you just tend to rotate it in as that's versatile. I think that shoe was more kind of targeted initially as a mileage shoe for Kipchoge, if I'm correct. And then, but because it was called the Turbo, I think people kind of thought, turbo means kind of fast or whatever. So it kind of became a session shoe and, So, definitely a versatile shoe from memory, the Turbo.
Sammy, I was just thinking from a training perspective, often, start of a training block, maybe in the start of a marathon block where you're starting to do some workouts, maybe a versatile shoe is a good way to break yourself back into that routine of sessions, and rather than going straight into the lightweight flats or super shoes. I know when
almost like a way of transitioning into shoes for sure. Yeah, and I think with particular shoes there can be a little bit more of a transitioning process into rather than just jumping from one model to the other. You can almost have a shoe there in your rotation that just helps your body adjust to what you're trying to get to in your next shoe.
Yeah,
just think about
recovery point of view as well. Just being able to come off those sessions early on and feel like you're not too banged up the next day.
Yep. Yeah.
What about the New Balance Fuel Cell TC, Sammy? I've had that one and I've used that. It's probably not so much on a long run, but I've used it across multiple types of sessions. And I guess it was more like a feel. I bought it for like a tempo run, but I just sort of went for a jog in it the other day and it felt really good.
Yeah, that's another good example, I reckon, of a shoe that for one runner it could be it could be their race shoe. For another runner, it could be their mileage shoe, and for another runner, like a session type shoe. I mean, look, sometimes with those shoes, it can be a matter of where the plate might sit in them, where you tend to get some kind of like cushion from the foam versus the shoe being too rigid. Like, I think when a shoe becomes too rigid, almost the longer you go in it and the slower you go in it, it doesn't feel as nice. So the TNC, I reckon, ticks that box of being quite a versatile shoe for sure.
I think it's come across that I think it's the cushioning that I really enjoy out of that shoe, and same with the peg turbos as well, that made it feel like that sort of gave me that versatility. So Sammy, with the super shoe, so I was just wondering, how could a runner who trains in support shoes best choose a super shoe? Like, if you're constantly in those support shoes and you're wondering if you want to step up into a racing type super shoe, what would they look for?
Yeah, it's a good one. Like, even though technically brands aren't offering like a super shoe that offers support, so to speak, I suppose some super shoes will be probably more stable than others, and there's a few kind of attributes to a shoe that might make a shoe more stable. Like, one thing you can kind of look for that can provide a runner with some stability through a shoe is, like, when you turn a shoe underfoot and you're looking at the platform and the amount of like surface area you're getting through a shoe. So, I suppose no matter where your foot hits the ground, part of the shoe is making contact with the ground. So that's one thing you could look for, in a super shoe is, how much of a platform is underfoot. The other thing you can kind of look for that might, give some kind of stability through a shoe is often the firmness of the foam. So if a shoe is, relatively firm and rigid, the shoe should, function relatively stable for the runner through their gait cycle versus, I've got a shoe here that's like very flexible, very soft. You can imagine that's not going to be very stable for a runner. So I think you've almost got to get a little bit clever and look at how is a shoe stable, and can I get that from some super shoes, and some super shoes are definitely more stable than others. So it's that, looking for that rigidity in the right parts, which you've almost got to match up a little bit, based on your mechanics. Where are you efficient with your gait cycle? Where aren't you? And can the shoe do something there to kind of help in that? Yeah. Does that kind of make sense? Like, does that?
Yeah.
And what's this rebellion here? Like, it's just to highlight how a shoe can be stable in some parts and maybe not as stable in others, is like the plate kind of sits a little bit more through the rear foot here. So if someone kind of was like quite strong on their heel through their gait cycle, that's going to be quite stable under there. Then it's a little bit more flexible than, say, like an Alpha Fly that's like really stiff and rigid up through that forefoot. So again, it kind of depends where you hit the shoe, where are you efficient through the shoe and your foot strike, and how can the shoe work with you in that regard. I mean, look, in terms of like support shoes, and I'm sure I've probably touched on this a little bit, support, when customers walk in the door at our shop, let's just say 10 people walked in the door and they needed support shoes. Normally it's because of like pronation within their gait cycle. And sometimes it might be because of an injury concern where we're trying to, navigate through. It might be something like tib post issues or something like that. So, yeah, as I touched on, even though the super shoe doesn't have that medial support, some will give better stability through the shoe versus others.
So you can get pretty good guidance when you're in the store, obviously, on a treadmill, as well as getting the athlete's running history. Is that how you'd sort of guide them into that first super shoe?
Yeah, really, just understanding the runner, the story of the runner. Again, I think we've talked about this a little bit, is just their history of shoes. Like I think that always really helps us make good decisions about maybe the types of super shoes we think might work for them. If they're coming from some shoes that are already quite high stack, they might be in a Hoka or something, then maybe we look for that in a super shoe. Or if they're, maybe they're using some lower drop type shoes in their rotation, then maybe we look for that in a super shoe. Yeah. So, I think that history of shoes is always a good one when it comes to making that next update with your footwear. Yeah.
Nice one. Sammy, got a question leading into the track season here in Australia. We're going to be getting on the tartan tracks, and there's a few athletes that are, looking to transition into spikes. Is there some tips for runners who are maybe their first time using spikes, or just coming out of winter training, out of super shoes and onto the track in some spikes?
Yeah. I actually had a good chat to Chris Armstrong, one of the Run to PB coaches, who has been on the podcast a few times, always speaks really well, Chris. This is probably a good one where, again, we really want to look at what's the story behind the runner. Like, maybe what injuries have they had in the past? What types of shoes are they currently wearing? Have they maybe got a shoe in their rotation that we can use to help them transition into spikes? So in Chris's case, I remember he had the LT, the Streak, that quite aggressive Nike racing flat. So even though he hadn't been using it a lot recently, I said, well, let's bring that into your rotation. Let's get comfortable with that. That's probably going to strengthen your calves and Achilles a little bit to withstand that load that you're going to feel through the spikes. Yeah, so it's a lot less about, we don't even really look at the gait cycle of a runner when they come in for spikes. It's more just trying to understand the shoes that they're currently using, and you're almost just trying to limit that risk factor of going too quickly into the spikes. Where are they strong? Where, is there something that we can incorporate in their training to kind of help that transition? So again, like if we look at the calf and Achilles, things like some calf raises, maybe some strides in bare feet. Just making subtle changes to the shoes.
Because I know I got some Dragonflies. Was it when there was a drop not too long ago, and I was quickly onto only just got in. I know I had to search around to get my size. Actually, it was a lot of stores had sold out pretty quickly, but I got some Dragonflies, and I messaged you, Sammy. Damn good looking shoe. They're really impressive looking one. Best spike I've ever had, that's for sure.
What spikes have you had before, Mattress? When was last time you bought a pair of spikes?
Yeah, I've had the Matumbos. I've had quite a few sets of Matumbos. I've never had the Victories, but pretty much stuck to the Matumbos. I might have had the Lanang sort of steeple spikes for a little bit as well. I did like the Matumbos. I did a lot of racing in cross country and track in them. But yeah, I pulled up after the session. So I messaged you, Sammy, and asked, and I didn't see your response until after I'd done the session. And you advised me to do something quite a bit less than what I did on the day. I think you told me to do maybe 5 or 6 strides rather than 400s. And yeah, I pulled up really well, and they're they're like, compared to the super shoes. I did 400s in super shoes in the Vaporfly the next percent, and then I pulled those on, and could definitely feel like the rigidity in the shoe. And it took definitely the first rep I felt a little bit awkward, but the second rep was much better. And you could just feel the Zoom X through the midsole really gave it a lot more cushioning, and yeah, it felt a lot more support than what I'd ever had in a spike before. But definitely, I know that the things I'd been doing are like, you were saying before, calf raises, so strengthening those and doing seated calf raises with some pretty heavy weights. I'd also do some skipping as well, just to get everything sort of strong enough to hopefully be able to pull on the spikes and not get too sore. And so that was, I was pretty lucky that I pulled up really well in terms of the calves and Achilles. My ankle was pretty stiff, where I'd had surgery before on that ankle to clear up some bone spurs.
Sure.
But that settled down over the next couple of days after that session. I haven't put them on since, but yeah, I'm looking to in the next probably couple of weeks. And
was that was on the track? Was it, Matty? Or
yeah, that was on the track. Yeah, so lucky enough that Mornington Tracks was in our 5K bubble, so went down there for that session, and I reckon I don't think I'll do another one this week, but probably next week I think I'll get back on the track for another session and probably do a little bit more than the 400s in them. Yeah,
I mean it's good hearing all that feedback, because there's, I suppose, your little story there is, it's probably a combination of the shoe was probably assisted a little bit, like the foam in these super shoe track spikes. Your calves, Achilles, things like that have been really good for the last kind of 6 to 12 months. You run a lot of hills in training and so forth. So you've probably, whether you've intended to or not, you've probably set yourself up quite well to transition into the spikes relatively safely. You had a pair of the New Balance. What was it? I think I actually encouraged you to get them. It was like a 6 mil drop.
The Rebel.
The Rebel, yeah, the V1. Like that's probably a shoe you maybe could have used a couple of times before throwing on the spikes. Yeah, but anyway, it sounds like you've pulled up pretty safely in it, and which is good.
Yeah, touch wood, that continues.
Yeah, but I think probably because
they're a fun shoe to try on, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I think the key now would be to frequently use them. Yeah, so everything kind of is familiar. You're not leaving it too long between using them again.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I was going to head down to the track last week, but I was just to roll out some 200s. Just 8x200 with 200 jogs, something a bit shorter, but yeah, just to keep that momentum going with the spikes. And I think that's a really good point. Yeah, just not to chuck them on and hope that, I pulled up all right. Need to keep going with that and keep building the strength in order to then hopefully hit some track sessions during the summer.
And I mean, my advice with Chris was very conservative. I probably took the safest approach, but I suppose we went with that because he doesn't really want to be in them until the summer track season. So we had plenty of time up our sleeve. There was no rush. So I was just like, all right, do your calf work, do some strides in your LTs, then maybe do a couple of sessions in your LTs, then introduce the spikes with some strides and so forth. And yeah, so probably 2 examples there of you're probably kick-started, or not kick-started, but you've probably jumped that section a little bit quicker than what Chris is going to, but that's fine. It sounds like you've got through it okay.
Yeah, and like when you talked about before, looking at the history, like I've been using spikes for, well, other than the past couple of years, I've been using spikes a lot in my running when I used to do a lot more track races. So yeah, it is something that I guess I'm probably a little bit more adjusted to. Yeah.
I'm going to say, Mattress, would you be doing a workout a week in spikes during summer?
Yeah, at least one or two, and even pretty much during winter, we'd always be doing 8-4 or up to 10 to 12 400s or 8-4s with a float, the Deeks quarters session. Pretty much, weekly.
Spiking up for that.
Spiking up for that. Yep.
Nice.
Probably why I needed ankle surgery.
Nice one.
Zach, have you run a 10K in spikes? Is that right?
I have, yeah. And I didn't transition well enough into them, so I came off that with some Achilles. I think Achilles had sort of been hanging around prior to that, and I was probably just on top, and that seemed to put it over the edge of 10K in spikes when I hadn't worn spikes for quite a while. So that was a live and learn moment.
I borrowed spikes too, weren't they? They weren't yours.
Yeah, they weren't actually mine in the end. The spikes I was going to go with, they weren't ready to go. So I had an opportunity to wear a different pair, and ran a good race, but I paid the price.
30-20? Was it 30-21?
25, I think. And
25. Giving you some.
Yeah, it's staggering.
Yeah, I remember. I was well behind you. Well, 20 seconds.
Yeah. Glory days.
Glory days.
We fit a lot of teenagers for spikes, and like when you look at that demographic compared to say a 40-year-old runner, they're normally like really light, pretty efficient. They're probably already doing a lot of their training in like flats and so forth. So it's normally like actually a really pretty safe, easy transition into spikes. So I think that again just kind of highlights how the history of the runner and the story of the runner really probably dictates how quickly you adjust to them, and how safely you do.
Sure. Now, Sam, we also had a listener question come in through Instagram from Anna Ellis. And thanks very much, Anna, for supplying this question. And she wanted to know, how do you know when it's time for new shoes?
Yeah, easy. I coach Anna. She likes her shoes, so I think she probably wants us to say it's time for new shoes or something. Yeah, I mean, look, I know we've probably touched on this in a few different ways over the different episodes. Maybe one thing I could add to, when do we know it's time for an update is probably, say with your mileage shoe, when you get to about 300K or so of using it, maybe just pay a little bit more attention to how it feels and how it's kind of behaving in your runs. Like, does it feel how it felt after 100K, or does it feel like, vastly different to how it felt? And then that, I reckon that's kind of telling you a bit more about the shoe and what you might expect the shoe to kind of feel like in the next few 100K. So if it's changed a lot, I would say that it's probably only got another couple of 100K left, versus if it actually feels a lot like how it maybe felt after 100K, then maybe the lifespan of the shoe is actually going to be, quite good. Yeah. But I think, look, it always comes down to how frequently are you using the shoes? How are you using the shoes? Are you rotating the shoes? Are you letting the foam, retain its kind of integrity a little bit after its runs? Probably another way to really look after your shoes, and again, I'm sure we've maybe mentioned this, but just use them for running. Like, don't use them for everything else. Yeah, so that'll really improve the lifespan of the shoe. Yeah. I try to not get too caught up in the wear pattern of the shoe. Like, I think the more I've fitted people, the more I've learned about different people's mechanics and gait cycles and injuries and that. I think the wear patterns maybe don't tell us as much as we think about the shoe, other than that's just where a runner probably puts their force in the shoe, and that's it. I don't think it's really telling us too much about their ankle, their foot, you know, how efficient they are and how that might be actually wearing the shoe out. Yeah, so I think I would probably rely a little bit more on how is the shoe feeling for the runner, and just using that as a bit more of a guide. Yeah, and look, there's always, I suppose, the metric of, you know, that kind of 600 to 800K in a mileage shoe. Yeah, I think that's probably the key component. Yeah, go for it, Zach.
Sammy, based on that sort of 600 to 800K, I know with foam and the new technology, has the newer shoes like improved that, or is it pretty much still at that level? Like, you know, you think about whether there's, I don't know if the shoe companies are trying to get you to buy more shoes, or I just wondered that.
I would almost say brands now are almost saying to a runner, like, you're going to get a better experience out of this shoe, but you're not going to quite get the durability that you once got. So, you know, you might, I'll just throw out a number, you might wear the shoe 300 times and have, you know, 250 really enjoyable runs in it, versus a shoe's going to last you 600 runs, but 500 of those runs aren't going to be, you know, the most enjoyable. That's, I hope that kind of makes sense what I've just thrown out there. But yeah, so I think it's probably more you're buying a shoe now for the experience of it. You know, it feels comfortable, it feels plush, it feels responsive, versus you're going to get that really high durability out of it. Yeah. So I think the majority of the foams are probably indicating that they probably bottom out a bit quicker than you know, your models 5 or 10 years ago. Yeah.
But then for me, on the flip side, is that I feel like I recover better off my hard sessions in, say, a super shoe. So then I don't actually feel the impact as much on the easier days. So whether that's just a training effect more than actual what the, you know, underneath the foot is, I just don't feel like you know, my shoes, I don't know, I feel like it lasts longer because I'm feeling better on my you know, pulling up better on the sessions days. Don't know if that makes any sense to you guys, but that's sort of how because I'd always sort of come off the back of sessions and be like, oh, I'm flat and tired, and then I'm in the shoes, I'm like, oh, maybe it's also the shoes, but it could be a combination.
Yeah, I think when you've got a number of shoes in your rotation, you might your ability to maybe read the shoe and its durability might be less than, say, if someone only had one pair of shoes.
Yeah.
You know, and they're probably going to really be able to have almost like an intuitive feel of you know, how that shoe feels each run.
Yep.
Yeah. And then look, then there's some shoes that almost come to life a little bit through their lifespan. Like we spoke about the Mizuno 5, the review we did about a month ago. Like, I think that shoe would almost not have a second life to it, but might become more enjoyable the longer, you know, you get into its lifespan. Yeah,
I've been wearing that a lot, actually. In my, I wore it yesterday on the long run. I wore it a few times throughout the week, and I think the Wednesday, sort of that midweek long run and a couple of easy runs. And yeah, I've found that absolutely what you're saying there, Sammy. The longer I run in it, the better it feels. And I remember the first time I put it on, I'm like, oh, I'm really not a massive fan of this shoe. But yeah, every run has got better. I don't know when that turning point's going to be, but it does seem like a pretty durable shoe at this stage.
Yeah. I mean, I turn my shoes over pretty quickly, obviously. Like, you know, I'm fortunate to be in the position to try lots of shoes and be in the industry. So I'm not the best person to judge shoes on the durability. But what I do a bit, though, is I'll put a shoe aside and then maybe come back to it in 6 months and just pull it out again and then start using it. So I kind of get about 200K into shoes and go, okay, now it's time for something else. But I do enjoy then going back to it and then seeing kind of, oh, okay, how's it feeling now after 300K, 400K? So, yeah, I mean, I do have some shoes in my rotation that have got up to like 800-900K, but I just haven't used them like that from the start, if that makes sense. Yeah, I've kind of, just brought them in and out of the rotation at different times. Yeah.
Particularly with the super shoes, I've got an athlete, Paul, who down in Tassie, he's got a pair that he wore one marathon and then he put them back in the box and might bring them out again. So there isn't any issues with doing that. Like, is there any, I don't know if the technology around storing them or, if there's anything around that?
I think probably the main maybe approach in terms of caring for your shoes would be like, if they get wet, that'll probably affect the foam.
Mm.
If they get too hot where you're storing them, that'll probably affect the foam, especially like the P-backs type foams and so forth. So yeah, like the boot of your car or something, you probably want to be mindful of where you're keeping them.
Or if you go out and you jump through a few puddles, don't get the hairdryer on them to dry them out for the next day, kind of thing.
Using that kind of stuff. I don't have a hairdryer here, but I mean, look, I think you'd be pretty safe just to throw them in the box and pull them out again in 6 months, and they should be in pretty good, in a pretty good way. Yeah.
Nice one.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, Sammy, thanks so much for jumping on. Always a pleasure to have you on and hear, your wisdom after, especially chatting about their jumping in those spikes. It's got me excited again to
You've
try.
almost convinced me to start looking at these spikes, Sammy.
I mean, Matty, I reckon the other thing you could do as well is, it sounds like you've pulled up fine, and like you could almost even just incorporate a racing flat as well into your rotation. Do some sessions in a racing flat if you're down at the track, and those sessions where you might do like a tempo and then some faster stuff. Like you could use the flats for the tempo section and then jump into the spike. So even within the same session, kind of mixing up your shoe selection a little bit.
That's a good idea. I have to try that, especially that. I like that session, the tempo into some faster stuff with it, and chuck those spikes on for that faster stuff. Yeah.
Nice.
Well, so good having you on, Sammy, again. Listening, as I said, listening to that wisdom. And it's a pleasure, and we'll be catching up again to chat some shoes again in probably another month or something.
Yep. Pleasure, guys.
Thanks, Sammy. And big shout out to the running company Yarraville for all their support, and they're still operating online. They've got the store going. You can click and collect as well, Sammy.
Yeah, still doing as much as we can through the virtual fittings. I mean, it's kind of one thing we all really enjoy at the shop is having those conversations with people about their running and so forth. So obviously not being able to do the gait analysis and have people in the shop, we get to go back to those like conversations again, and so that's all kind of happening over the phone and so forth. So still really kind of encourage people to give us a buzz, and we can have a chat about your shoes and help you with your next update, and try our best to get you into the shoe that's right for you.
Fantastic, Sammy. Thanks again, mate.
Thanks, mate.
Pleasure, guys. Take care.
Cheers.